portion of the project, what we wanted to do was we're going to go ahead and cut this guy out of an image, and then we're going to be able to have that selection so that we could place it straight into something like InDesign or Illustrator. Going to make another one that has a drop shadow, which is probably not the most effective thing for him here. We're going to draw a little shadow down by his feet by hand, and then we're going to go ahead and make a cast shadow. So ultimately, I need 4 different objects that I can send out of Photoshop to be able to import into InDesign. So I'm going to go on over here to Photoshop. First thing I'm going to do before I get started is this note on this page says that I need to change the canvas size to slightly more than double so that I can have room for this. All right. So I'm going to go into my Photoshop document. I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size. Here, before I even get started with that, I'm going to go ahead and dupe this by grabbing the background layer and shoving it down and letting it go on the new icon. So now I've got my background and my background copy. Then I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and I'm going to move this to the top so that everything I add is going to add down here at the bottom where the arrows are. Otherwise, if I'd left it here, half of my new height would go to the top of him, which does us no good, and half would go to the bottom. So I'm sitting here. If this is just under 22, maybe I'll make this 45, so it's just a little bit bigger than double. Click OK. Go back to hit Command 0. That's going to end up being just fine. So now I'm going to zoom back in on him. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm on the top background copy. I'm going to get the quick selection tool. I'm going to go ahead and try to rub it all over him. It's going to do a pretty good job everywhere, except it doesn't really like his shoes, and it doesn't really like his laces, and then we still have a few other problems other than that. I'm going to check out to see how this did. I'm going to hit Q to hit Quick Mask, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This is looking okay. I'm going to go ahead and get, while I'm in the Quick Mask, going to get a paintbrush, fairly hard, and then I'm going to use the open bracket key to get really small here, and I'm going to like pull out some of these strands of his hair right here, so we still keep his little spiky haircut that he seems to be very happy with. And I'm doing this with black paint. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to take a look at the tennis shoes. Oops, it missed a little chunk right here, so I'm just going to paint this in by hand. Missed part of the toe of his shoes. I'm going to paint that part in. Missed a little bit of this glop of his shoelaces right in here. So I'm going to do something there. And missed this. The color was just too close to the background. So the quick selection tool didn't really know what to do with it. And then when I'm done, I think everything's probably fine. The problem is that a lot of times when you cut something out, it starts to magnify the areas that aren't so smooth. So like his jeans are bunched up here by his knee. The back of this leg is pretty messed up. So is this one in here too. Now that really is what he looks like, but again, the minute I cut it out, it's going to start to look funny. And he's got this kind of hunchback where his right shoulder blade is poking up really high, just a really awkward angle. So the one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch this to white, and with a slightly larger brush, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just kind of try to see where I could kind of round his shoulder out a little bit more. I still need it to stick up some, just I don't need that kind of almost hunchback look that he had to him. I'm going to move down a little bit, and I'm going to say that I think some of these other wrinkles don't need to be so big. So with still this white ink, I'm going to go ahead and kind of paint some of this out. Just try to smooth a few of those bumps out a little bit. This little bump on his jeans. Now this area right over in here, I just don't think that's adding any value. I'm going to go ahead and cut off like this bump and part of this bump on the back of his jeans. And then maybe if I'm worried that I left a little divot there, I'll switch back to black. Just going to paint a little bit right there. Same kind of thing. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of a little bit of that double bump right there. Maybe this thing in here. And I'm going to try to smooth this one out just a little bit more too. And then I'm going to clip off a little bit of this so that I can kind of round the bottom of its jeans out a little bit more. Which again, in kind of our silhouetted mode, will probably look a lot better by doing that. And, oh, and then this one knee. So I'm going to just tack that down a little bit. Hit Q, and then on this background copy, I'm going to go ahead and hit the quick mask, or add layer mask. Boop. And as soon as I've done that, I bet he looks a lot better right now. Just to be able to prove this, and also since I never want to build a shadow on a complete transparent background, I'm going to go ahead and click a new layer, and I'm going to move that underneath my masked guy. I'm going to come over here to the fill color. I'm going to maybe grab this and slide it all the way to the top so I can see some bright colors, and I'm going to just pick kind of a blue or a green color. And then with that being in the foreground, I could either hold down the Option button and just hit delete, or I could go edit, fill, and change this so it says foreground. And now I'm going to be able to see how that looks a little bit better. And if for some reason I wanted to still on his jeans, I could go back to the mask layer. And I don't want to be on the image right here. I want to make sure that I'm on the mask so that I can go back to painting with black, and I could go ahead and paint some of this out a little bit more to again continue just to try to smooth some parts around by this knee a little bit. Maybe even cut a little bit more off the back of this jeans just so they don't poke out so far. And I'm reasonably happy with how my new shoulder blade looks. And really for what we're trying to do on this is probably more than adequate. So that's great. Now I'm going to make sure that I get off that mask, painting with the black and the white, and get back on the picture. I'm going to go back to Command 0. Now the first shadow that we're going to end up doing is the drop shadow. So all I need to do from that is if I hover on the layer with the mask, I'm right here on top of the mask over here, and if I hold the command button down, you'll see that the back of the hand also gets a marching ant box added to it. So if I click on that, it'll actually reactivate the mask, my fixed mask. So now I've got a selection going right here. I'm going to go to a new layer, and if you want to, I'll make these in a couple different ways. I could, with this new layer being here on top, I could go edit, fill, and change this to black. Oh, that seems to cover the guy up, but remember, he's now floating on top of this whole thing. So what I can do with this is I could move him a little bit to the right and down some, maybe about here like that. And then once I've done that, I need to move this layer underneath my good layer. And we're sitting here like that. Now while I'm still on layer 2, which is where my drop shadow is, I need to go up to Filter, Blur, and go to Gaussian Blur. That means random. I think for this assignment I said just do it at 33 pixels. To be honest, it could probably be even more than that, but we'll just leave it at 33. Click OK. Got one more problem. The drop shadow is way too dark, so I'm going to change the opacity to about 45 to 50. We'll just say 45. It's perfect. So that one's done. Now I want to make the mask under the little goofy hand-drawn one that's under his feet that looks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this layer 2 off. If I wanted to, I could double click on the name and call this drop shadow. And then I'm going to hide it. So I'm back to just my original cutout guy. And if I wanted to, I could make a new layer. There's layer 2, and I'm going to call this Goofy Shadow. I've got a couple options here. I could come up in here and I could use the elliptical marquee tool. I could draw a thin circle. I could go, I'm just going to take the shortcut, change this to black. This way I could still go edit, fill, black, or the foreground color, which is now black. Or with it being selected like this, I can just hit the little bitty option and hit delete. And then I could go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, 33, change the opacity to 45. And I could end up having that. If I don't like the way it looks, I could go up to edit. I could pull down to free transform, and I could squish it slightly. I could stretch it. I could do whatever I want. I could even, if I move my tool down in here, I end up seeing these kind of, the arrows kind of turn to like an angle. I could push and hold, and now I could rotate it while I'm still in this if I wanted to. Return, but that's actually not how I made this one. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that away. Instead, I'm going to make a new layer, go back and call it Goofy. And all I did with this one is I went and got the lasso tool, and I tried to draw an object that was kind of following the contour of his legs and feet, so it looks about like that. And while I'm on the Goofy layer, not the layer with the background, again, my foreground color is black. Option delete, filter. If I went to Gaussian blur, it's just going to do it at the last number it remembered, which is 33 for all these. And then I could change the opacity to 45. And then I could also decide if I wanted to. I could go to Edit, Free Transform, or Command T. I could squish it a little bit more. I could move it to where I wanted it to go. To be honest, it's still probably a little bit dark, but we'll just say, and the shadow or the blur could actually be bigger. We'll say that one's fine too. Last one we want to do is the cast shadow. So for this one, I want to make a new layer. I'll call this one Cast Shadow. This is the most complex of these ones. I'm going to need to get back to his body to make the base of this one, so I'm going to hold the Command button down and hover over the mask so that my little marching ant box pops up on the top of the hand. Click, and I'm going to see the selection running around him. Excellent. I've got black in the foreground color, so I could hold the Option button down and hit delete. If I really wanted to see that, I could move it on up here. Now, I need to do several things to get it to flip and invert. So while I'm on this image, I'm going to go Edit, Transform, Flip Vertical, and then I'm going to just grab the Move tool, and I'm going to move him down some. And then I got a couple of different options. I could go Edit, Free Transform, and I could just pull and stretch a little bit. I'm going to hit Escape to get rid of that. I could end up, or with that same box, I could end up doing this rotate command by being out here outside of the box and doing something like this a little bit. So I'll rotate them a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to tell it that I want to do a Distort. So I'm going to kind of pull this down, but then I'm going to grab this corner and I'm going to kind of pull this in so it doesn't get a whole lot wider. I could even at this point decide that what I really want to do is also a little perspective. So grab this dot, because it wouldn't be unlikely that his shadow would kind of get a little narrower as it goes along. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Distort a little bit. And I'm just going to keep pulling down, maybe to about here. Hit Return. Now, for the shadow to work, what I really probably need to do is make sure that this is at an angle and that kind of matches with the feet, but I also kind of don't want this break in the shadow right here underneath his foot. So I'm probably going to go back one more time, Edit, Transform, Perspective. I'm going to grab kind of this corner and I'm going to pull up, which is going to do, instead of the perspective, I should have gone Edit, Transform, Distort. Grab this corner and kind of pull it up so that the shadow starts to kind of fit underneath his foot. And hit Return. And then I'm not real happy with, well, this will be just fine. Then I'm going to go up to Filter, Gaussian Blur. I'm going to go ahead and change the opacity to 45 or so. I'm going to make sure that this is under my mask copy so my shoes pop back up. And then what I'm going to do is, this shadow is the same depth or the same darkness all along in here, and that's not what would happen. The shadow would be much brighter or darker by his shoes, and it would fade out when we come back down here. So probably the fastest way to change that is to, on this layer with the cast shadow, click down here at the bottom of your layer palette until you find the Add Layer Mask icon. Poop! It pops this thing up over here. Make sure that black is in the foreground, because black means cover up. Remember, if you look at this mask, black is where everything else is. The white is where the guy is. So everything we don't want is in black. And I'm going to go get the gradation tool. And I want to check a couple things. One, I want to make sure that I'm hovering on the far left one of these little icons. That means it's a linear gradient. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy up here. I don't want it to go black to white. I want it to go the little preview is showing, which is the second one always whatever the color the foreground is to clear with these gray and white boxes. And click OK. And now if I come down here, and if I go black to what it's looking like here is black to white or black to clear, it's going to leave in the clear area the shadow, but where I put the black on it, it's going to fade away. So if I start here and drag the whole length of the shadow, it's going to kind of fade it out about halfway. I'm going to hit Command Z. If I just want to get rid of his head, we'll kind of end it here. So I've still got a harder shadow, but again, I'm going to go back and pretty much take out almost all the way to the feet. So it looks something about like this. Okay, now that I've got this document done, what I would probably do is go up to File and pull down the Save As and change the name. Click OK on the compatibility button. You could take the time to do this. Turn all the eyeballs off, but the guy and this, and go up to File, pull down the Save As, and call this Scared Guy. Leave it as a Photoshop file, Scared Guy Cast Shadow, and click Save. And then I could turn this one off, and I could turn on the Goofy Shadow and go up again, File, Save As, Goofy Shadow, and then and then come back and turn on this one and save it out as multiple different pieces. But I'll show you in a different video that if you just have the layered Photoshop file and it's saved, that you're good to go and you can do all that adjustment in InDesign so that we can turn off all these layers, because this document really kind of looks like this: the guy, the drop shadow, the goofy shadow, and the cast shadow, plus my green just to help me see the shadows, because without it, I can barely see what's going on in the shadows. And I still have the original back here just in case.